The psychic raven picked up a matchstick inside the mansion, then forcefully struck it against the doorframe. It immediately threw the match onto an antique sofa worth millions, and then quickly hid to the side, quietly observing everything from behind the fence. Soon, the thick smoke caught the attention of the security guards. As they went to extinguish the fire, the raven swiftly leaped from the attic, nimbly navigating through a small door to the basement. In the dim underground, its master was being held captive. As the raven perched on the cell door, the imprisoned man suddenly felt a connection and instinctively looked towards the raven, seeing his most beloved companion. A smile appeared on the man's face for the first time in decades. As the raven kept striking, he knew that he might finally regain his freedom today. But just as he felt a pang of sorrow watching the raven risk everything to save him, a sudden gunshot not only shattered his hopes of escape but also left him in shock as the crimson blood spilled. He never imagined that his beloved companion would die like this. Although the culprit was still standing at the door with a gun, he had no intention to pay attention to the detestable father and son. Only when the other man casually picked up the raven like trash did rage flood his face. He swore to make the father and son suffer before they died. The man's name was Morpheus, originally a master of dreams. One day while taming nightmares in the human world, he was unexpectedly summoned by a powerful spell. It turned out a wizard, attempting to resurrect his deceased son, recklessly used forbidden magic to summon death. Due to his insufficient abilities, the spell went awry, and as the runes on the ground lit up, instead of summoning death, the wizard accidentally called forth the Sandman, Morpheus. Realizing his mistake, the wizard, desperate to revive his eldest son, decided to target the artifacts carried by the Sandman. He first removed the sandbag that Morpheus used to control time, then took the gem that controlled dreams, and even stripped Morpheus completely naked. Still unsatisfied, he finally also took his helmet. Thus stripped of his artifacts, the Sandman was painfully imprisoned within the runes. From that day on, a great plague began to spread among humans, with many either trapped in perpetual dreams or unable to dream at all. Yet this was just the beginning. The original nightmare that was not dealt with properly now found the wizard. Initially wary of the nightmare's arrival, the wizard soon agreed when he learned its purpose was to permanently seal the Sandman. They quickly reached an agreement. The nightmare told the wizard that mere runes could not hold the Sandman. An additional protective barrier was needed. Also, all the guards must remain awake. Otherwise, the Sandman could enter their dreams and escape. Therefore, the guards consumed strong stimulants to prevent sleep, and the nightmare hoped the wizard would imprison the Sandman for generations as part of their deal. In exchange, the nightmare taught the wizard how to use the artifacts of the Sandman. From then on, the wizard's wealth grew tremendously, and he began to rejuvenate, living an extremely lavish life every day, until one day, an accident happened. A woman he often favored became pregnant, but the wizard demanded an abortion, forcing the woman to ultimately choose to flee. And not only did she take his wealth, but she also stole the 3 artifacts. To punish the woman, the wizard asked Morpheus to hunt down the fleeing woman. In exchange, he would release Morpheus, but only if the wizard was granted immortality. However, Morpheus remained silent and ignored him, infuriating him to explode on the spot. The sound of his cane tapping caught his younger son's attention, who tried to intervene but ended up angering the old wizard. Instinctively resisting, his son pushed him, and the wizard died on the spot. Even though the old wizard passed away, Morpheus did not gain his freedom. His younger son, who inherited the estate, continued to imprison Morpheus, until 70 years later, now an old man, he again proposed an exchange, immortality in return for Morpheus's freedom. But again, Morpheus refused with silence, having decided the moment he watched his pet die that he would have his revenge. Perhaps it was this determination that, a century later, finally brought an opportunity when the wheelchair accidentally broke the previous seal. Seeing hope, Morpheus intensely watched the guard outside, who suddenly felt sleepy. Quickly, the guard found himself on a beach he longed for, but just as he relished the beautiful scene, it turned bizarre. Thinking he was seeing things, the seas behind him rapidly vanished, leaving nothing but endless desert. As he stared in astonishment, the naked Morpheus suddenly appeared before him. With one hand bizarrely reaching into the sand, he walked straight toward the guard, who in panic, drew his gun and fired. This was exactly what Morpheus hoped for. The protective barrier finally broke, freeing him after a century of imprisonment. He blew the sand he had taken from the dream into the air, and the guard who came into contact with it immediately fell into a deep sleep. succumbing to the dreams. Now with more pressing matters to attend to, Morpheus used his powers to weave a special dream for the old man, transforming himself into a nightmare, ensuring the old man would forever languish in nightmares, unable to awaken. After avenging himself, he promptly returned to his own realm. Yet a great misfortune awaited him there. Followed by his servants, he walked toward his kingdom, but as he pushed open the doors as usual, a sad voice came from behind him. As the doors opened, the scene before him deeply pierced Morpheus's heart. The sight was devastating, hard for him to believe, as the place once filled with wonderful dreams was now a scene of ruins and severed limbs. Morpheus urgently asked what had happened, and the servant in front of him explained. During his 100-year absence, the nightmares that he had suppressed had gradually started to revolt, and many had already fled to the human world to cause havoc. Hearing this, Morpheus's expression suddenly turned grim, and he hurried towards his palace to verify the situation himself. However, the destruction he witnessed along the way only deepened his sadness. He couldn't imagine that in just 100 years, the home he had painstakingly built could be destroyed like this. In his bewilderment, he picked up a fragment from the ground, and in that moment, his sorrow transformed into rage. The fragments on the ground began to float into the air, driven by his provoked desire to unleash his power and restore the place. However, during the casting, a relentless drag of energy began to deplete him, and he was abruptly thrown back to the ground by the backlash. Slowly getting up, he hadn't expected that a century of imprisonment would so severely weaken his powers. After some recuperation, he planned to search for his artifacts first. It turned out that among the artifacts stolen by the wizard was a dream stone, which contained thousands of years of his accumulated power. But these artifacts had been carelessly stolen by the wizard's woman years ago, and their exact locations had long been unknown. Therefore, the Sandman planned to go to the underworld for help. But before that, he needed to prepare a few things. As his hands slowly approached the surface of the lake, the next second he was grasped by the nightmares within and pulled into the river of the dead. Using the power of the souls in the river, he first cast a spell to enter a farmer's dream. With the ability of the earth to nurture all things, he forged a crucifix, then took the place of a condemned man at a hanging. As the gallows were triggered, he suddenly fell downwards. But all this was an illusion. His true purpose was to use life and death to probe these vanities. Now, the place truly before him was where he ultimately wanted to be, because there were the favorite offerings of the triune goddesses. After catching a snake into a bag, he arrived at the center of the underworld and began summoning the triune goddesses, who were actually one person. They represented the past, present, and future, able to foresee the existence of all things in the world. Their biggest flaw, however, was their extreme greed. Fortunately, Morpheus was prepared, and he immediately presented the snake he had carefully sought. Pleased with this gift, the goddesses began predicting the locations of his artifacts. The first, the Sandbag of Eternity, was currently in possession of an exorcist named Constantine in the human world. His raven helmet, meanwhile, had been sold to a demon in hell by a human wizard. The last dreamstone was now in the hands of an ordinary human. After saying all this, the goddesses disappeared, leaving Morpheus alone to process everything. To recover his artifacts one by one, Morpheus planned to first seek out Constantine, but this woman, like his ancestors, was entangled with various karmic ties, foretelling that Morpheus's quest to reclaim his artifacts would be fraught with hardship. This was the beginning of an epic battle. Standing before them was a gateway to hell, made up entirely of the undead. To reclaim his artifacts, he planned to meet the legendary Lord of Hell, Lucifer. As the raven followed closely behind, Morpheus arrived in front of an ancient gong. Just then, a zombie slowly crawled out from the mountain beside the gong, seemingly under some command. It even handed him a mallet. After a moment's hesitation, Morpheus took the mallet from its hands. The original zombie, sensing danger, quickly burrowed back into the mountain. Meanwhile, the mallet struck the gong at that moment. The deep sound immediately caused the zombies inside the mountain to suffer unbearable pain. The alert raven suddenly sensed something was off. Then Morpheus turned his gaze to the entrance, where a tall figure was slowly appearing behind the door. Knowing the other was the gatekeeper of Hell's gates, Morpheus chose to reveal his identity on the spot to avoid unnecessary trouble. His confident tone left the gatekeeper with little choice but to not obstruct too much, and he led him towards Lucifer's location. Soon, Lucifer's palace appeared in the distance, and as Morpheus approached the grand doors, a powerful aura from the Lord of Hell quickly enveloped him. The rune-covered doors seemed to come to life and slowly began to open. but the ground was mixed with deep red blood that provocatively bubbled under their feet. Morpheus paid no mind to these intimidations and walked alone into another king's domain until the doors closed behind him. As Morpheus's silhouette slowly emerged from the shadows, the fallen angel Lucifer had been waiting for some time. This tall, white-clad woman moved with a hint of disdain, but as a visitor, the King of Dreams still showed the necessary courtesy. A brief exchange not only showed respect to the other party but also made his identity clear. However, Lucifer seemed to already know the purpose of Morpheus's visit, so her words were tinged with sarcasm, provoking Morpheus to state his intentions directly. Seeing Morpheus lay his cards on the table, Lucifer had no more excuses to delay, though internally, she did not want to make it easy for Morpheus to succeed, so she went straight to a high platform and with a casual gesture, the previously empty square was suddenly filled with dense thrones of demons. This move not only showed force to Morpheus but also placed him in a difficult position. Seeing this, Morpheus turned and walked back to the center of the hall, and after a moment of thought, he pulled up the sand of dreams and gently poured it onto the ground. Quickly, the sand began to move as if alive, mixed with Lucifer's surprise. In the swirling sands, a demonic figure with a helmet was suddenly transported there. Unexpectedly, this demon was a Duke of Hell, who was unwilling to return the items. The demon stated, although the items were Morpheus's, he would have to duel for them if he wanted them back. Morpheus agreed without hesitation, which was exactly what Lucifer had hoped. Seeing the stimulated Morpheus accept on the spot, the Hellish Duke immediately laid out the rules. If Morpheus lost, he would have to serve as his laborer and stay in hell forever. Morpheus did not expect such a demand, but to reclaim his helmet, he ultimately responded with silence after thinking it over. At that moment, Lucifer suddenly asked Morpheus who he would choose to fight for him. Morpheus chose himself. Hearing this, Lucifer couldn't help but laugh, then asked the Duke who he would choose for his champion. The Duke chose Lucifer. This left Morpheus sinking in despair. He hadn't expected the challenge to be manipulated this way, but since he had agreed, the battle for his helmet had to continue. The Duke of Hell had already made the duel public. To avoid unnecessary damage, both sides decided to settle the matter through a magical duel. In the first round, a probing exchange, Morpheus gained the upper hand. However, the slight injury only excited the fallen angel. In an instant, he manifested a snake that bit directly at Morpheus's heel. The poison quickly spread through Morpheus's body, corroding him completely. Unfortunately, this strike hit right on Lucifer's face, and even as a fallen angel, she cared greatly about her appearance. So, without any further reservations, she transformed into bacteria, not only corroding the eagle but also directly infecting Morpheus. At the brink of life and death, Morpheus thought of rebirth, suddenly transporting Lucifer to a vibrant world, where his wounds instantly healed. But at that moment, Lucifer summoned destruction. Morpheus had just realized the danger when he was overwhelmed by endless pain. This strike severely injured Morpheus, but at the moment of near death, he thought of a strategy. He thought of the universe, which embraces and nurtures all things. Lucifer declared herself the representation of anti-life, which devours all. The effect of anti-life caused Morpheus's vitality to rapidly drain away. He attempted to rise and struggle, but Lucifer's approach left him trembling uncontrollably. Just as all seemed lost, his raven companion flew to his side. The raven's words were like a revelation.
Dreams don't die. Not if you believe in them, and I believe Dream of the Endless would never leave his raven here alone in hell with Lucifer.
Giving the dying Morpheus a last burst of strength, he then mustered all his power to utter a phrase only he had the right to say. This hopeful utterance was filled with magic, illuminating the once darkened hell, even making the once fallen angel Lucifer consider stopping her descent. Seeing Morpheus's sincere face, she knew she had lost completely, and on the spot, she demanded the Duke hand over the helmet. Morpheus still needed to recover one last artifact, his ruby, which was now in the hands of a mortal. The old woman removed a cursed necklace and gave it to her son. She wasn't condemning him, she was trying to save him. As John took the necklace, his mother instantly aged several decades. A century ago, the old woman had stolen one of Morpheus's sacred artifacts, the ruby. While he was imprisoned, her son, John, grew obsessed with the artifact and stole it from her as it twisted his mind. Now, with Morpheus free, she knew he would seek revenge, so she hoped to trade the amulet for her son's life, urging him to return the ruby. But within seconds, the mother withered and died. A bodyguard, misunderstanding the situation, thought John had killed her and immediately aimed his gun at him. The bullet was deflected by the amulet, perfectly disintegrating the bodyguard into flesh and bone fragments, leaving nothing but splattered gore. With that, John easily escaped the prison that had held him for 30 years, leaving a bloody mess wherever he went. Having been confined for so long, John now wandered the world like a child seeing light for the first time, nearly getting hit by a speeding car. The driver, seeing his disheveled state, offered him a ride home, unaware she would regret that decision for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, Morpheus, using his other 2 artifacts, sensed the ruby's location and immediately teleported to an abandoned warehouse. This was where John had once hidden the artifact. But what Morpheus didn't know was that John had altered the ruby's properties, making it recognize only him as its master. At that moment, Morpheus vaguely saw a hand take the ruby, but he was powerless to stop it. He could only watch as his precious artifact was taken by someone else, the person being John. As soon as he left, John gave his mother's amulet to the driver who had brought him, cementing his intention to oppose Morpheus. The ruby's power was to make the wielder's dreams come true. John, who had lived his life surrounded by his mother's lies, used the ruby to make those around him tell the truth. But the truth was more dangerous than he imagined. When lies were stripped away, human nature began to warp. Those small sparks of desire were ignited, and once pure relationships became tragic and complicated. Faint affection quickly escalated into uncontrollable entanglements. Hidden scars were exposed, and the darker sides of human nature were laid bare. People began mercilessly attacking those around them. At this critical moment, Morpheus finally arrived at the diner. He explained the true purpose of the ruby and the dreams hidden behind the lies of mankind. John, unwilling to face the reality of his own delusions, refused to return the ruby and even aspired to replace Morpheus as the ruler of dreams. In an instant, John entered the dream realm, where Morpheus showed him his deepest nightmares. It revealed his longing for his mother, as well as his deep-seated fear of her over the years. But John used the ruby to shatter the dream, breaking into Morpheus's kingdom and using the ruby to burn all the dream records. Morpheus appeared to stop him, but John used the ruby to drain his power, keeping him firmly suppressed. In just moments, John had absorbed all of Morpheus's strength. However, after everything had ended, John awoke in Morpheus's palm. It turned out that John's abuse of the ruby had caused the power Morpheus once stored within it to explode, returning to Morpheus's body. Yet, Morpheus didn't kill John. Instead, he sent him back to the psychiatric hospital where he had spent the last 30 years. Though Morpheus had recovered his 3 artifacts and restored the dreaming in the human world, the true undercurrents had only just begun. A long-hidden dream vortex was slowly emerging, pushed forward by someone lurking behind the scenes. A girl had entered Morpheus's dreaming while asleep, the first mortal to do so in millennia, leaving Morpheus stunned. In fact, every 1,000 years, a dream vortex appears in the mortal world. A person with the same powers as Morpheus, whom even he cannot control. Only by destroying the vortex can both the dream world and reality be saved. But Morpheus didn't intend to kill her right away. Instead, he wanted to use the vortex to track down his 3 rogue nightmares. At the moment, Rose just wanted to find her brother Jed, who had been lost due to their parents' divorce. So Morpheus agreed to help her search for him, but no trace of Jed could be found, either in reality or in the dream world, which made it clear that someone else was behind it, likely targeting the dream vortex. But why didn't this person simply kidnap Rose herself? In reality, Jed was being kept in a basement by his foster parents, living a life worse than a family dog. They only kept him around for the $800 in welfare checks. Since Rose had entered the dreaming, she had developed the ability to explore other people's dreams. Whenever she slept, she could enter other people's dreamscapes and learn their deepest secrets. Though she had just acquired this skill, she moved effortlessly between dreams. In one of her neighbor's dreams, Rose encountered Morpheus. Seeing her, even he felt a bit awkward. To better understand the situation, Morpheus taught her how to search for her brother through memories. Soon, Rose saw her childhood home. This confirmed that they had entered Jed's dream, which was also being monitored on a screen by Galt, one of the rogue nightmares. Seeing the intrusion, Jed transformed into a superhero to fight. In reality, he was imprisoned by his foster parents, and in his dreams, he was deceived, which explained why no one had been able to find him. Rose recognized her brother and immediately asked him for the address of his foster parents. Galt also returned to her true form to greet her master. It turned out that Galt hadn't betrayed Morpheus. She simply couldn't bear to see Jed experience such a bleak childhood. She had been weaving comforting dreams for the boy, but since she had violated Morpheus's rules, she had to face punishment. Once Rose woke up, she quickly set out to bring her brother home, only to find the place surrounded by police, with his foster parents dead. Fortunately, Jed's body wasn't found, but unfortunately, he had been taken by the nightmare Corinthian. Meanwhile, a woman dreamt of her deceased husband, and her belly visibly grew in the dream. Even more strangely, when she woke, she found herself actually pregnant. She shared the news with her friend Rose, but Rose knew this was because her frequent dream hopping in search of her brother had weakened the barrier between dreams and reality, likely one of the dangers of the dream vortex. Still, she had no time to dwell on it, as she had just learned that her brother had been saved by a kind stranger, and she was eager to reunite with him. What she didn't know was that the kind stranger was the rogue nightmare, Corinthian, and that her helpful neighbor offering to drive her was none other than Corinthian himself. Since the elderly man was always kind, Rose agreed without hesitation. Along the way, whether due to exhaustion or the relaxation from knowing she would soon reunite with her brother, Rose fell asleep in the car. She once again entered her friend's dream, but this time something unexpected happened. The dreaming shook violently, and the true ruler of dreams, Morpheus, guessed that all of this was Rose's doing. Morpheus arrived before them and, with a wave of his hand, took away the ghost of the woman's husband. Her friend's beautiful dream was shattered. The child had been conceived in the dream, so naturally, it belonged to Morpheus. When the baby was born, he would come to take it away. Before Rose could speak, Morpheus had already returned to the dreaming, never one to back down. Rose angrily followed him, storming into his realm. Though this was the second time she had intruded, Morpheus was still quite surprised. Even though Rose had caused all of this, she furiously demanded that Morpheus stay away from her friend. When Rose woke up, she rushed to the hotel where her brother was. The older man who had come with her noticed that the hotel was filled with cult members, and soon after, he spotted Corinthian. Realizing something big was about to happen, the old man revealed that he was actually Fiddler Green, a dream from the dreaming. He had returned to warn Morpheus that Corinthian had established a cult in the real world and intended to team up with Rose to overthrow him. Meanwhile, Rose's brother accidentally witnessed Corinthian committing murder, which terrified him, and he ran away. As Jed ran, he collided with a man unbeknownst to him, one of the cult's key members. Just then, Rose arrived to reunite with her brother. After breaking free, the two tried desperately to escape, but they ended up trapped in a dead-end alley, frantically turning the door lock. They couldn't get it open, and as the man closed in on them, the situation took a sudden turn. Corinthian proposed an alliance to Rose, offering to help her unleash the full power of the dream vortex, merging the dream world and reality. This way, they could defeat Morpheus. Rose, knowing that Morpheus would eventually kill her, agreed to join forces with Corinthian. Corinthian then gathered all his followers, and under his influence, their consciousnesses entered Rose's dream simultaneously. In an instant, the dream became a twisted exhibition of sins. At the crucial moment, Morpheus attempted to stop Corinthian, but reality was crueler than he had anticipated. An ordinary dagger could wound Morpheus, as his power was being drained by the dream vortex. Before long, Rose would replace him and become the new Morpheus. The two of them then entered Rose's dream. Corinthian continued to coax Rose, urging her to draw more people into the dream. Morpheus warned her that if she continued, the earth would collapse, and all life in the universe would be wiped out, though it would cost her life. Rose ultimately chose to side with Morpheus. In an instant, everyone returned to reality, and Morpheus's wounds began to heal quickly. Seeing the tide turn, Corinthian stopped resisting, and Morpheus turned him to dust. Rose, now awake, hurriedly took her brother away, but she knew this issue had to be resolved eventually. She couldn't just stop sleeping for the rest of her life. That night, Rose tried her best to resist entering others' dreams, but things rarely go as planned. Not only did she enter others' dreams, but she also pulled everyone she knew into the same dream, leaving no secrets between friends and family. Even her boyfriend's emotional infidelity was caught in the act. How embarrassing. As more people were drawn in, a massive vortex suddenly appeared in the dream. The vortex echoed from top to bottom, growing larger by the second. Rose tried to reassure everyone that it was just a dream and nothing would happen, but the next second, someone was sucked into the vortex, their fate unknown. Fortunately, Morpheus arrived just in time to stop things from getting worse. But now, the only way to end it all was to kill Rose. Elsewhere, Rose's grandmother seemed to sense something and entered Morpheus's dreaming. Though Morpheus was used to mortals entering his realm by now, the old woman's words sent a chill down his spine. She revealed that she was the true dream vortex. 100 years ago, when Morpheus was imprisoned, many mortals fell into deep sleep. which caused the vortex to be transferred to Rose. By this logic, Morpheus himself was responsible for the vortex. Though something didn't feel right to him, a dream vortex could only form naturally, never through human intervention. Before she died, the grandmother mentioned that while she slept, she encountered a man with golden eyes. Morpheus immediately thought of his sibling, Desire, and after dealing with the dream vortex, he went straight to confront Desire. He warned them that if they ever tried something like this again, the consequences would be dire. But being Desire, they would never give up so easily. And meanwhile, because of the earlier incident with the Helm of Destruction, Morpheus had made an enemy of Lucifer, and now all of hell was stirring. A man publicly declared he would not die. A statement so absurd it sounded like the bravado of a drunk man to those listening. But unknown to him, Death and Morpheus happened to be in that tavern. At that moment, Morpheus was curious why a human would wish for immortality, so he approached the table and made a pact with Hob. In this tavern, we meet again in 100 years. Everyone laughed off what they had heard as a joke, the laughter grating, but Hob took it seriously and confirmed with Morpheus that he was serious. After receiving Morpheus's confirmation, Hob agreed to meet again in 100 years. Satisfied with the answer, Morpheus departed, but Hob was left troubled, not even sure if he could live that long. Time moved quickly to 1489, and in a corner of the tavern, both men arrived as promised. Hob was curious why he had lived so long, even suspecting a demonic curse, but Morpheus quickly dismissed this, explaining he just wanted to see when humans would tire of living. Hearing this, Hob immediately told him he hadn't lived enough. There were still many things he hadn't done. He hadn't even managed to find a wife due to avoiding wars over the century. Morpheus smiled understandingly and then agreed to meet again in another 100 years. Time flew by, and by 1589, Hob had become wealthy and shared his joys of family life with Morpheus. Morpheus asked if he, having enjoyed all earthly pleasures, still wanted to live. Hob responded that although life was becoming mundane, he still wished to continue. Another century passed, but this time only Morpheus waited in the tavern. Just as he was becoming impatient, a beggar-like figure barged into the tavern. Seeing he was about to be expelled, Morpheus ordered the guards to let him be. Once given the go-ahead by Morpheus, Hob hurriedly joined him at the table, sharing how miserably he had lived the past century. Due to business failures, he had become a beggar, and his wife and children had left him. He even experienced the agony of starving for 10 days yet not dying, which even made Morpheus feel sympathy. Despite such suffering, he still wanted to live. Time advanced to 1789, and the age of exploration allowed Hob to seize opportunities, even earning a title of Viscount. However, during their conversation, Morpheus learned he was involved in the slave trade and hoped he would avoid such morally corrupt activities in the future. Yet, just as they were making plans to meet again, a premeditated crisis quietly unfolded. Earlier in the century, a curious individual had discreetly documented their story, and it was discovered by the exorcist Constantine. She believed these two individuals, meeting every 100 years. He gently blew into his palm, and a large amount of fine sand began to drift without wind. Constantine was swept up in it, her eyes turning white as she was completely immersed in a dream. This thrilling yet safe episode thus came to an end. However, the spark of friendship had quietly ignited between the two during this incident. After ensuring each other's safety and expressing mutual concern, they agreed to meet again in 100 years. Time always flies swiftly, and suddenly it was 1889. The dimly lit streets were guided by bright yellow street lamps pointing the way for Morpheus. While Hob had already been waiting there early, perhaps intentionally, they talked a lot. Morpheus knew the others still didn't want to die, so they agreed to meet again next time. But Hob, feeling familiar enough, ventured to ask a bold question. He inquired if Morpheus's centuries of meetings were due to loneliness. This word, loneliness, deeply pierced Morpheus's heart. This emotion caused a wave of anger, and he angrily declared that they should never meet again. As he stormed out of the small tavern, Hob tried his best to retain him. "I'll be here in 100 years, waiting for you. If you come, it'll prove that we are still friends." Time flew by filled with regrets, and it was suddenly 1989. Hob arrived early at the agreed-upon place, but Morpheus never showed. He regretted his previous offense, constantly hoping that the next person to appear would be Morpheus. Only when the bar owner announced closing time did Hob leave somewhat reluctantly. Unbeknownst to him, at that moment, Morpheus was trapped in a magic circle, only managing to escape many years later. Over those years, he had reflected on his temper. At that time, his sister Death appeared again, telling Morpheus that the friendship hadn't faded. To alleviate her brother's loneliness, She had ensured Hob was still alive. With renewed hope, Morpheus hurried to their usual meeting place, only to see that it was about to be demolished. Just as he thought he might miss this friendship forever, Morpheus noticed a message on the wall left specifically for him by Hob. Following the directions, he arrived at a small house nearby. It was there he saw the man who had been waiting for him all along. Hob told him that he had bought the place to make it easier for Morpheus to find him, as he always believed Morpheus would come again.